He helped a stranger in the rain, not knowing the millionaire bride was running from her fate. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The rain fell in sheets, drumming on the tin roof of Ethan's attic apartment. The world outside was a blur of gray, the alley below cloaked in darkness and the wail of the storm. He sat by the window, a book open on his lap, its pages untouched. The words couldn't hold him tonight. A faint cry pierced the wind, sharp and desperate, like a bird caught in a snare. Ethan froze, his pulse racing. It came again, closer, from the alley. He threw on his coat, the worn fabric heavy with damp, and hurried down the creaking stairs. The barbershop below was dark, its striped pole still. Outside, the rain stung his face as he peered into the alley's mouth. A figure stumbled through the gloom, a woman, her hair plastered to her face, her steps frantic. Behind her, two men in dark coats moved with purpose, their voices low and sharp, lost in the storm's roar. "Hey!" Ethan's voice cut through the rain, surprising even himself. The woman's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide with fear, catching the storm's light. She tripped, catching herself against the wall. The men slowed, their gazes locking onto Ethan. He didn't think. He ran to her, his shoes slapping puddles, and grabbed her arm. "This way," he said, pulling her toward the barbershop door. She didn't resist. They ducked inside, the door slamming shut behind them. Ethan fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking as the men's footsteps echoed outside, then faded into the rain. The woman sank to the floor, her breath ragged, her body trembling under a soaked jacket. Ethan knelt beside her, his voice soft but urgent. "You're safe now. You're okay." She looked up, her face pale, her eyes searching his. There was something in her gaze. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of recognition, like a half-remembered dream. Ethan brushed it off. "Come upstairs," he said. "You'll catch your death out here." The stairs groaned under their weight as they climbed to his apartment. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of old books and coffee. Ethan grabbed a blanket from the couch and draped it over her shoulders. She clutched it tightly, her fingers white. He moved to the stove, filling a kettle, the clink of metal loud in the quiet. "Tea?" he asked, glancing back. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Her eyes darted to the window as if the storm might carry her pursuers through the glass. Ethan lit a small lamp, its glow soft, casting shadows across the cluttered bookshelves. He handed her a mug, the steam curling like a sigh. "I'm Ethan," he said, sitting across from her. "You don't have to tell me anything. Just rest." She sipped the tea, her hands steadying. "Claire," she said after a moment, her voice low like a secret shared under a village lantern. The name hung in the air, simple yet heavy. Ethan nodded, his gaze quiet but intent, tracing her face. High cheekbones, a faint scar above her brow, and those eyes holding something unspoken. He wanted to ask who she was, why she was running, but the words felt intrusive, like stones thrown into a still pond. The rain softened, a steady patter now. Claire set the mug down, her fingers brushing the table's edge. "You didn't have to help me," she said, her voice stronger but still soft, like a melody half-sung. Ethan shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't leave you out there." She looked at him then. Really looked, and her eyes held that same flicker. Familiar, searching, like she knew him from a life before this one. Ethan's breath caught, a strange warmth stirring in his chest. He didn't know her story, but in that moment, under the dim lamp's glow, he felt it. A quiet secret, hers or his, waiting to unfold, like a shadow half seen in the dawn's first light. The rain had settled into a soft drizzle, tapping the window like a restless child. Ethan's apartment felt smaller now, the room hushed, steeped in the scent of old books. Claire sat at the table, the blanket still draped over her shoulders, her hands still on the steaming mug. Ethan leaned against the counter, his hands shoved into his pockets, watching her. The lamp's glow outlined her form, flickering like a memory he couldn't place. "You don't have to stay here," he said, his voice low but firm. "But you can, as long as you need." He didn't know why he said it, instinct maybe, or the way her fingers trembled around the mug. Claire's lips parted, then closed. She looked up, her gaze sharp like she was measuring him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. "You don't know me." Ethan shrugged, a quick jerk of his shoulders. "Doesn't matter. You were in trouble. He turned to the stove, busying himself with a rag, wiping down the already clean surface. Her question hung there, unanswered, but he felt her eyes on him, probing, like she was peeling back layers he'd long buried. She stood, the blanket slipping to the chair. Her steps were light, almost soundless, as she crossed to the bookshelf. Her fingers brushed the spines, lingering on a worn copy of poetry. "My mother used to read this," she said, so softly Ethan almost missed it. He turned, the rag forgotten in his hand. Claire's face was half lit, her expression distant, like she was standing in two places at once. "Your mother liked poetry?" he asked, stepping closer. The question felt safe, a bridge over the chasm between them. Claire's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "No, but someone read it to me, a long time ago." She pulled the book from the shelf, her fingers tracing the faded cover. "A small shop on Willow Street where a kind woman read to me." Ethan's chest tightened. His mother's bookstore was on Willow Street. "What kind of shop?" he asked, his voice sharper than he meant. He took a step toward her, his posture tense, fixed on the book in her hands. Claire's brow furrowed, her gaze flicking to his. "It was, I don't know, quiet, cozy. There was a woman there, kind, with green eyes like yours." Her words hit Ethan like a gust of wind, sudden and cold. He froze, his breath catching. His mother had green eyes. She'd run that shop for years, reading to kids, to anyone who'd listen. "What was her name?" Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of years. Claire's fingers stilled on the book. I don't remember. I was so young." She opened the cover, her eyes scanning the pages as if they held answers. "She read me poetry, words that felt like hope. I'd forgotten until now." Her voice cracked, a small fracture in her guarded wall. Ethan's voice faltered. He crossed the room in two strides, standing close enough to see the faint scar above her brow. "That was my mother," he said, his words tumbling out. "She read to everyone, in her shop, on Willow Street." His hands clenched at his sides, the memory flooding back. His mother's voice, soft and steady, filling the shop with words that felt like home. Claire's eyes widened, the book slipping slightly in her grip. "Willow Street," she echoed, her voice a breath. That's where it was." She looked at him, really looked, and the air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. "You're her son?" Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, she's gone now. 5 years." The words were simple, but they carried the ache of everyday since. He turned away, his gaze falling to the floor, unable to hold her stare. Claire set the book down, her movements slow, deliberate. "I'm sorry," she said, and it wasn't pity. It was something deeper, like she'd carried a piece of his mother's light all these years. "I heard years later, the shop had closed. I hoped it wasn't true." Ethan looked back, meeting her eyes. They were softer now, like a lake after a storm. He wanted to ask more, how she knew his mother, why she was running, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he saw it, a thread, fragile and unseen, woven through time, tying them to a shop long gone. It was a pebble dropped in still water, rippling outward, stirring something neither could name, like a song caught in the throat, waiting to be sung. The morning crept in, gray and heavy, the drizzle a faint murmur against the window. Ethan's apartment was quiet, save for the soft creak of the floor as Claire paced near the bookshelf. Her fingers grazed the spines, restless, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. Ethan sat at the table, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, watching her. The air felt charged like the moment before a storm breaks. Last night's revelation, Claire's memory of his mother's shop, hung between them, a fragile thread stretched taut. "You don't have to decide anything now," Ethan said, his voice steady but quick, cutting through the silence. "Stay another day, or don't. It's up to you." He set the mug down, the clink sharp in the small room. Claire stopped, her hand lingering on a battered copy of Whitman. She turned, her face half lit by the dim light, her lips tight. "You don't get it," she said, her words clipped like a blade flashing. "If I stay, they'll find me, and you'll get hurt." Her eyes flicked to the window, then back to him, sharp with something like guilt. Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasping together. "Who's they?" he asked, his tone firm, not letting her dodge. His gaze, steady and searching, held hers, like he could pull the truth from her silence. She crossed her arms, her shoulders hunching. "It's complicated," she said, her voice low, almost a growl. "My family, they want me to marry someone. It's not love, it's a deal, a merger." Her words spilled out, fast and bitter, like water breaking a dam. My mother stayed silent, caught in his shadow, but her eyes held regret. I ran because I couldn't breathe in that world, but they won't stop looking. Ethan's jaw tightened. He stood, his chair scraping the floor. So you keep running? He asked, stepping closer. Or what? You disappear forever? His voice was sharp now, not angry but urgent, like he was chasing something slipping away. Claire's eyes flashed, but she didn't back down. What do you know about it? She snapped. Her voice caught, her hands dropping to her sides, fists clenched. You live here, in your books, your quiet life. You don't know what it's like to be trapped. Her shoulders hunched, shielding her face. Ethan's chest ached, her words slicing deeper than she knew. He took another step, close enough to smell the faint damp of her jacket. I know trapped, he said, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. My mom, she was my world. When she died, I didn't just lose her. I lost me. His hands shook and he shoved them into his pockets. I stayed here, yeah, in these books, but it's not living, it's hiding. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his. The anger in her face softened, replaced by something raw, like a wound laid bare. I'm sorry, she said, her voice a whisper, like leaves falling. I didn't mean… It's fine, Ethan cut in, his tone brisk, but his eyes stayed on hers. Point is, I get it. Running, hiding. But you're here now, and I'm not letting you face this alone. His words were a promise, unyielding, like a tree standing against the wind. She stared at him, her breath steadying. Slowly she uncrossed her arms, her fingers brushing the book again. Your mom, she said, her voice softer, like a memory surfacing. She taught me to read, not just words, but stories. Her stories made me feel seen. I wanted to be that brave, to choose my own verse. Her voice trembled, raw. I'd go to her when my parents fought, when their world felt too big. She'd read to me, give me tea, like you did last night. Ethan's throat tightened. He saw it. His mother, her green eyes bright, reading to a small girl with golden hair. Claire, he swallowed, his voice rough. She loved that, helping kids like you. He paused, then added, she'd have liked knowing you remembered. Claire's lips curved, a faint, sad smile. She read me this one poem, she said, opening the Whitman book, her fingers finding the page. Oh me, oh life, it stuck with me. That line, the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. I forgot it until now, until you. Ethan's breath hitched. That was his mother's mantra, her way of seeing life. He stepped closer, his shadow blending with hers in the lamp's glow. Claire wasn't just a stranger. She was a piece of his mother's light, carried across years, standing here in his cluttered room. It changed everything, like a familiar face seen anew under starlight, illuminating a truth he hadn't dared to name. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a fragile light over the city. Ethan's apartment felt too small, the walls pressing in with the weight of yesterday's truths. Claire stood by the window, her posture tense against the window, watching the street below. Ethan watched her from the kitchen, his hands gripping a dish towel, the air between them taut with unspoken questions. Her confession about the arranged marriage, her memories of his mother's shop, had shifted something in him, like a door creaking open after years of rust. We're going out, Ethan said, his voice quick, slicing through the quiet. He tossed the towel onto the counter and grabbed his coat. You need air, so do I. Claire turned, her brow furrowing. Out? It's not safe. Her voice was sharp, her arms crossing tightly like a shield. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to him, wary as a deer in an open field. Ethan stepped closer, his expression steady, unwavering. Nobody's looking for you in a crowd, trust me. He met her eyes, his stance firm, his words firm, a challenge wrapped in a promise. 5 minutes, a walk, that's all. She hesitated, her lips parting, then closing. Finally, she nodded, a small, reluctant jerk of her head. Fine, but if I say we leave, we leave. Her voice was low, edged with steel, but her shoulders softened, just a fraction. They slipped out, the barbershop door creaking behind them. The street hummed with life, vendors calling, kids darting through alleys, the air sharp with the scent of wet pavement and grilled bread. Ethan led her to a quieter corner, a narrow lane lined with sycamores, their leaves trembling in the breeze. The city felt alive here, not threatening, and Claire's steps slowed, her arms loosening at her sides. This place, Ethan said, his voice lighter now. My mom used to bring me here, Said it was where the world breathed. He pointed to a bench under a tree, its wood worn smooth by years. She'd sit there, read to me, tell me stories about people who lived small but mattered. Claire's eyes followed his gesture, her face softening. She sounds incredible, she said, her voice soft, like a whisper in a quiet room. She sat on the bench, her hands resting in her lap, fingers twisting together. My parents cared about power, not me, not like her. Ethan sat beside her, close but not touching, his hands shoved into his coat pockets. Yeah, well, Mom thought everyone's life was a story. Said it didn't matter how big it was, just that you lived it true. His words came fast, spilling out like he was racing to share her before the moment slipped away. She taught kids to read, gave them books, listened when no one else would. Claire's gaze dropped to her hands, her voice barely audible. Her stories made me feel seen. She looked up, her eyes raw and unguarded. I wish I'd told her thank you. Ethan's chest tightened, his mother's face flashing in his mind, her green eyes, her quiet smile. She knew, he said, his voice rough but sure. She always knew. He leaned back, the bench creaking, and for a moment they sat in silence, the city's pulse blending with the rustle of leaves. A leaf fell, spiraling to the ground. Ethan reached down, picked it up, its edges crisp and golden. Without thinking, he pressed it into Claire's hand, his fingers brushing hers. For you, he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. Mom used to say leaves carry stories too. Claire stared at the leaf, her fingers curling around it. Her eyes widened, and when she looked at him, her eyes held something new. Not just gratitude, but a spark, like a lantern lit in the dusk. You're like her, she said, her voice soft but clear, each word deliberate. You don't just help, you see people. Ethan's heart stuttered, her words landing like a stone in still water. He wanted to shrug it off, to say it was nothing, but her gaze held him, steady and piercing. The leaf in her hand wasn't just a leaf, it was a thread, tying his mother's kindness to this moment, to Claire, to him. It wasn't just shelter he'd given her, or tea, or a walk. It was something deeper, rooted like the sycamores around them, stretching back to a shop on Willow Street. In her eyes, he saw it, a bond, unspoken but real, woven through years like roots anchoring a village tree to the earth. The afternoon light filtered through the attic window, painting Ethan's apartment in soft golds. The room glowed, warm with the scent of old books and the faint tang of onions sizzling in a pan. Claire stood at the stove, her sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot of soup with a wooden spoon. Her movements were quick, almost frantic, as if cooking could anchor her to this moment, this place. Ethan sat at the table, sorting a stack of books, his glance flicking to her, quick and attentive. A curl of gold on the table caught the light, a trace of their walk. You don't have to do that, Ethan said, his voice sharp but kind, cutting through the sizzle. He set a book down, its cover worn, and leaned forward. I've got leftovers. You're a guest. Claire's spoon paused, her face sharp as she turned, her hand brushing her brow, faltering. I'm not a guest, she snapped, her words quick, like a spark. I don't know what I am, but I'm not just sitting here. She resumed stirring, her shoulders tense. The pot clattered faintly, betraying her unsteady hands. Ethan stood, crossing to the counter in 2 strides. All right, he said, his tone softer but still brisk. Then let me help. He grabbed a cutting board, slicing a carrot with quick, practiced chops. The rhythm of their work filled the room. Chop, stir, clink, like a song they hadn't meant to play. For a moment it felt like a home, not just a hiding place. Claire glanced at him, her lips twitching, almost a smile. You're good at this, she said, her voice lighter, teasing. Librarian by day, chef by night? Ethan snorted, a quick laugh escaping. Mom taught me. Said a man who can't cook is only half a man. His knife slowed, his eyes distant for a second. Then he shook it off, tossing the carrots into the pot. You? Where'd you learn? Her smile faded, her gaze dropping to the soup. Boarding school. The cooks let me help sometimes. Felt normal. Her voice was low, the words spilling fast like she was afraid they'd slip away. Not like the rest of my life. Ethan nodded, his hands stilling. He wanted to ask more, about her life, her family, but the air felt fragile, like a spider's web stretched thin. Instead, he moved to the bookshelf, pulling down a dusty photo frame. Here, he said, handing it to her. Mom, in her shop. Thought you'd like to see. Claire took the frame, her fingers brushing his. The photo showed a woman with a warm gaze, smiling softly, surrounded by books. Claire's breath caught, her eyes glistening. "She looks just like I remember," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Kind, like she saw you, really saw you." Her fingers tightened on the frame, too tight. The frame slipped, hitting the counter with a crack. The glass shattered, scattering shards across the floor. Claire gasped, dropping to her knees, her fingers clenched as she fumbled for the pieces. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking, fast and panicked. "I didn't mean... I'm so sorry, Ethan." He knelt beside her, his hands gentle but quick, stopping hers. "It's just glass," he said, his tone firm, cutting through her frenzy. "It's okay, she's still there." He pointed to the photo, unharmed, his mother's smile untouched. But his chest ached, a sharp pang, not for the frame but for the memory it held. Claire's fingers clenched, her eyes locked on the photo. "The last time I saw her," she said, her words tumbling out, "she gave me a book, said it was for when I felt lost. I was 8. I never went back after that summer." Her voice cracked, raw and unguarded. "I wish I'd told her what it meant, what she meant." Ethan's throat tightened. He saw his mother in Claire's words, her quiet way of giving, of healing. He reached for her hand, his fingers closing around hers, steadying her. "She knew," he said, his voice rough but sure. "She always did." His eyes held hers, green meeting a storm, and for a second the world was just them, the broken glass, the photo. Claire's breath steadied, but her eyes were wet, holding a storm. She clutched the photo, her voice a whisper. "You're like her, Ethan. You give everything." Her words hit him like a gust, stirring something deep, a truth he hadn't faced. He felt a fierce need to shield her, not just from danger, but from a life she didn't choose. The crack in his heart wasn't just his mother's loss. It was a longing to love, to give, as she had. Claire's presence, her words, her brokenness, made it clear, like a wound laid bare, sealed by her touch, yet opening a deeper rift he hadn't known was there. The moon hung low, its silver light spilling through the attic window, casting long shadows across Ethan's apartment. The room tense, heavy with unspoken fears. Claire stood by the door, her eyes darting to the street below, her hands clenched at her sides. The table stood bare, a stark contrast to their fleeting warmth now overshadowed by dread. Ethan paced, his gaze sharp, unyielding, his jaw tight. The quiet of the past days had shattered. Footsteps had echoed in the alley an hour ago. Low voices circling like wolves. They were coming. "We need to move," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent, slicing through the stillness. He grabbed his coat, tossing Claire's jacket to her. "Now, there's a back way through the shop." His movements were quick, deliberate, like a man who'd already decided to stand against the storm. Claire caught the jacket, her face pale, her lips parting in protest. "Ethan, no," she said, her words fast, edged with panic. "You don't know who they are. They'll hurt you." Her eyes locked on his, wide and pleading, but her hands fumbled with the jacket, betraying her resolve. He stepped close, his hands gripping her shoulders, his gaze unyielding. "I'm not letting them take you," he said, each word a hammer strike. "Not after everything. You're not running alone anymore." His voice softened, but the urgency remained, a current pulling them both. "Trust me, please." Claire's breath hitched, her eyes searching his. For a second, the world narrowed to just them. Green meeting, gray, a silent vow in the moonlight. She nodded, a small, fierce jerk of her head, and pulled on the jacket. "Okay," she whispered, her voice steadying, like a flame finding its wick. "But we stay together." They slipped down the stairs, the barbershop below cloaked in darkness. The air was cool, smelling of aftershave and dust. Ethan led her to a back door, its hinges creaking as he eased it open. The alley beyond was a tunnel of shadows, the moon's light barely reaching the damp pavement. They moved fast, their steps light but urgent, Claire's hand brushing Ethan's arm as they navigated the maze of crates and bins. A shout cut through the night, sharp and close. Ethan froze, pulling Claire behind a stack of boxes. Footsteps pounded. 2 sets, heavy and deliberate, coming from the street. Low voices muttered, words indistinct but laced with menace. Claire's hand tightened on Ethan's, her breath shallow, her body pressed against his in the cramped space. His heart raced, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the alley's mouth. "They're here," Claire whispered, her voice a thread, barely audible. "Ethan, we can't." "We can," he cut in, his whisper fierce. He peered around the boxes, spotting two figures in dark coats, their silhouettes stark against the streetlight. One held a phone, its glow casting a cold light on his face. Ethan's mind raced. He knew these alleys, every corner, every shadow. "Follow me," he said, pulling her deeper into the dark. They darted across the alley, ducking into a narrower path lined with rusted fences. The footsteps followed, faster now, the men's voices rising, sharp with frustration. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears, but his steps were sure, leading Claire through a gap in a fence to a vacant lot overgrown with weeds. The moon lit their path, silver and unforgiving, as they crouched behind a crumbling wall. Claire's eyes were wide, her breath ragged. "They won't stop," she said, her words tumbling out, fast and desperate. "My father, he hired them, but once, when I defied him, his eyes faltered, like he saw my mother's strength in me. They're his will." Her voice broke, but her gaze held Ethan's, raw and fierce. "I don't want you hurt because of me." Ethan's hand found hers, his fingers tightening, grounding her. "I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice low, a vow carved in stone. He wasn't hiding anymore. Not from her, not from this. His eyes burned into hers, and in that moment, he saw it. Claire wasn't just running from her father, from a marriage. She was running toward something, toward him, toward the life they'd glimpsed in soup pots and shared stories. A beam of light swept the lot, a flashlight cutting through the dark. "There!" a voice barked, and the footsteps surged closer. Ethan pulled Claire up, his heart lurching. "Run!" he said, his voice a whip crack. They sprinted across the lot, weeds snagging their clothes, the flashlight's beam dancing behind them. Ethan shoved through a gate, Claire right behind, and they stumbled into another alley, its walls closing in like a trap. The men were close, too close. Ethan spun, pushing Claire behind him as the first man rounded the corner, his face hard, his hand gripping a baton. "Enough running, Whitmore," the man growled, his eyes locked on Claire. Claire spat back, "I'll never be his," her voice fierce despite her fear. "Your father's waiting." Ethan stepped forward, his body a shield, his voice steady despite the fear clawing his chest. "She's not going," he said, each word a blade. "Walk away, now." His fist clenched, his stance wide, rooted like a tree against the wind. The man sneered, raising the baton. Claire gasped, grabbing Ethan's arm, but before she could pull him back, the second man lunged from the shadows. Ethan dodged, shoving Claire clear, but the baton caught his shoulder, a sharp crack of pain. He staggered, gritting his teeth, and swung, his fist connecting with the first man's jaw. The man stumbled, cursing, but the second grabbed Ethan, slamming him against the wall. "Ethan!" Claire screamed, her voice raw as she lunged at the man, her fist pounding his back. The first man recovered, grabbing her arm, yanking her toward the street. Ethan roared, adrenaline surging, and broke free, tackling the man holding Claire. They hit the ground hard, fists flying, the world a blur of pain and moonlight. But the men were stronger, trained. A sharp blow to Ethan's ribs sent him to his knees, gasping. Claire fought, kicking, screaming, but the first man dragged her toward a waiting car, its engine rumbling. Ethan crawled, his vision blurring, his hand reaching for her. "Claire!" he shouted, his voice breaking, raw with desperation. She twisted, her eyes meeting his, wide and fierce, even as the car door opened. "Ethan!" she choked, her voice a lifeline, but the man shoved her inside. The door slammed, the engine roared, and the car sped into the night, leaving Ethan on the cold pavement, blood on his lips, the night sharp and unyielding. The men vanished into the city, their orders unclear, their haste suggesting fear, as if they knew failure would cost them. He staggered to his feet, his body screaming, but his heart screamed louder. They'd taken her, but not what they'd built, not the moments, the quiet home they'd made. He'd chased her, fought for her, but now he saw it. He wasn't just saving her, he was saving them, the life they'd woven in these fleeting days, a home not of walls but of hearts. He imagined a place far from these streets where they could start anew. The truth hit like a wave, reshaping everything, like a path leading not to her, but to an unexpected home he'd never dared to dream. The cathedral's stained glass gleamed, casting jeweled light over the pews packed with silken suits. Claire stood at the altar, her white gown heavy, her gaze distant, unyielding. The groom, a stranger in a tailored tux, loomed beside her, his smile sharp, a contract sealed in flesh. Her father, Richard Whitmore, sat in the front row, his face a mask of triumph. The organ droned, each note a chain tightening around Claire's heart. She saw only Ethan, his green eyes, his quiet smile, the sycamore leaf in her pocket, now crushed but warm against her thigh. The priest's voice boomed, "Do you, Claire Whitmore, take this man?" But her pulse roared louder, drowning him out. Her hands trembled, the bouquet slipping. She'd been dragged back, locked in her father's world. But Ethan's vow in the moonlight burned in her chest. She wasn't his. She was hers. And his. A crash shattered the hymn. The cathedral doors burst open. A day later, bandaged by a kind stranger, Ethan staggered in, his coat torn, blood streaking his cheek. His ribs screamed from the alley fight, but his eyes locked on Claire, fierce, unyielding. The crowd gasped, murmurs spreading like whispers in a crowded room. Richard stood, his voice a whip. "Security! Remove him!" Ethan pushed forward, his steps uneven but relentless. "Claire!" he shouted, his voice raw, cutting through the chaos. "I love you. I'm not losing you again." His words were a lifeline, each syllable a hammer breaking her cage. Guards lunged, but Ethan dodged, his gaze never leaving her. Claire's heart surged. She dropped the bouquet, its petals scattering like snow. "Ethan!" she whispered, then louder. "Ethan!" She tore the veil from her hair, the fabric ripping as she ran, her gown trailing. The groom grabbed her arm, but she yanked free, her eyes blazing. "I'm done!" she spat, her voice a blade. She sprinted down the aisle, the crowd a blur, and threw herself into Ethan's arms. The groom stepped back. The merger dissolved, his pride no match for her choice. He caught her, his breath ragged, his hands cupping her face. "We're going," he said, his voice low, urgent. Guards closed in, but Claire clung to him, her fingers digging into his coat. They shoved through the doors, rain greeting them, cold and sharp. They fled the cathedral, the rain hiding their path, no pursuers daring to follow after her public stand. Her father's men, shamed by the scandal, were dismissed, their loyalty broken. The city swallowed them, their steps pounding wet pavement, hands locked, hearts racing as one. They left the city behind, seeking a quieter life where their past couldn't follow. 2 years later, dawn painted a small town in soft pinks. Claire stood in their bookstore, shelves brimming with stories, the air warm with coffee and paper. Jack, their son, toddled between tables, his laughter a melody. Ethan stacked books, his green eyes crinkling as he watched them. The sycamore leaf, pressed in a frame, hung above the counter, beside his mother's photo, her smile eternal. The bell chimed, and Claire froze. Her parents stepped in, Richard, his suit less proud, and her mother, eyes weary. No guards, no demands. Just them, humbled, unsure. Richard's voice was low, almost broken. "Claire, we were wrong." Her mother reached out, then stopped, her hand trembling. Her eyes, once resigned, now searched for forgiveness. Claire's chest tightened, old wounds stirring. She looked at Ethan, his nod steady, grounding her. She stepped forward, Jack in her arms, her voice quiet but firm. "This is my home," she said, each word a stone laid in a new foundation. "You can be part of it, but not like before." Richard's eyes glistened, his nod slow. Her mother smiled, tentative, a crack in their old wall. They sat, Jack babbling, Ethan pouring coffee, the room filling with light and laughter. Claire watched, her hand brushing the leaf's frame. This wasn't just freedom, one that rainy night when Ethan burst through the cathedral. It wasn't just love, forged in alleys and soup pots. It was home, built from broken glass, stolen moments, and hearts that chose each other. The morning unfolded, gentle, unbroken. No grand gestures, no final answers. Just them, together, the bookstore alive with their story. Claire's fingers found Ethan's, their warmth a quiet promise. The past lingered, scars unhealed, but in this moment, under dawn's soft glow, peace settled, warm as the bookstore's glow. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that hope can be found in the most surprising moments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Love Story. We bring you stories that touch the soul, renew your belief in kindness, and highlight what's truly important in life.